It has been a rough week for the country. Earthquakes in less than 2 days on the country's 3 main islands. On Monday, a 6.1 quake jolted Luzon. A day after, a stronger quake hit 6.5 hit eastern Samar in the Visayas. And yesterday, a magnitude 4.7 tremor jolted the town of Baganga in Davao Oriental in Mindanao. No significant damage to life and property in the Visayas and Mindanao, but Luzon, particularly the province of Pampanga, is still reeling. And to discuss with us this series of earthquakes, we have in the studio PHIVOLCS scientist Dr. Teresito Bacolcol. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Good morning.
Okay, so many questions. We really want to understand what is happening here. So since Monday, there have been several quakes and hundreds of aftershocks in different parts of the country. The major ones, the magnitude 6.1, yung sa Zambales, the magnitude 6.5 sa Eastern Samar. How does PHIVOLCS explain this? Normal ba na magkakasunod ng quakes?
Earthquakes are random events. So, coincidence lang to. Totally not related because the Zambales earthquake was generated by a local fault. And it's totally different from the generator of the summer earthquake, which is the Philippine Trench.
Okay, so basically it was just a coincidence na nagkasunod
That's right,
sila.
that's right.
Okay. Tell us about the risks now, you know, days after the quakes. Are we still expecting aftershocks?
Yes, we're still expecting aftershocks. And as of 4 a.m. this morning, around 680 aftershocks are recorded in Zambales and around 80 aftershocks in Samar. So, but the rule of thumb is that the aftershocks would be 1 magnitude lower than the main shock. So, in Samar, it was magnitude 6.5, and we would expect the maximum probably magnitude aftershock would be 5.5.
Okay, so always weaker than the
yes,
the main
always
quake.
weaker than the main shock.
Okay, tell us about the sources of these quakes. For Zambales, what fault line was that? What was the generator?
Zambales was generated by an unnamed local fault, while the summer earthquake, as well as the Mindanao earthquake yesterday, were generated by the Philippine Trench.
The Philippine Trench. What is the scope of the Philippine Trench?
Philippine Trench runs from Bicol down to Mindanao. So it's quite long.
Okay, so you would really feel it from Visayas to Mindanao.
Yes, that's
So
right.
to clarify, the Samar quake and the Mindanao quake are somewhat related.
They're generated by the same trench, which is the Philippine Trench.
Okay. We always hear about the West Valley Fault. How long is the West Valley Fault, and when was the last time an earthquake came out of that?
Okay, the West Valley Fault is about 100 kilometers long from Bulacan, Quezon City, down to Cavite. And the last time it moved was in 1658. And
1658?
Yes, that's right. And we have a recurrence interval of around 400 years. So for the last 1,600 years, there were 4 events. So you divide that by 4, that means 400 years. So 1658 plus 400, that would be 50. Yes, that's right, 2058.
Okay, so maybe a few decades from now. Pero
give or take, yes.
pwede rin mapaaga,
Earlier
diba?
or later.
Right, okay. And if that were to move, if an earthquake were to be generated out of that, how strong would it be?
We're expecting a magnitude 7.2 earthquake. 7.2 magnitude earthquake along the West Valley, based on its length.
Okay. Can you help us understand, pag mas malapit ka sa epicenter, does it mean that buildings there are more likely to be damaged?
Not necessarily. It depends on, like how strong the building is. You really have to follow the building code, and if you really follow the building code, the shell building code, I don't think your building would collapse.
Okay. Now, there are fears that because of the quakes, Mount Pinatubo might erupt. What do you say about that? Do you see this happening? Would those events be related?
Our data do not suggest any, but we're still trying to study Mount Pinatubo. We're closely monitoring Mount Pinatubo, but as of now, our data would not suggest any, possible activity of Mount Pinatubo as a result of this magnitude 6.1 in Zambales. But we're closely monitoring Mount Pinatubo.
Pero as of now, medyo tahimik lang
Yep, that's right.
Okay, yesterday I spoke to an official from Tacloban, and when they experienced the shakes, there was panic really because people felt, or there were rumors, or people thought that there would immediately be a tsunami. Have you monitored the possibility of any tsunamis arising from the quakes that we've had this week?
Although the generator of the summer earthquake was Philippine Trench, but the epicenter was inland. So 6.5 inland would be able to generate a tsunami.
As long as it's inland.
Yes,
but do we have the capability of detecting quakes that might happen at sea?
Yes, we have 100 seismometers spread all across the Philippine archipelago, and we are capable of monitoring any earthquake that might happen offshore.
Okay, so in case there were to be one, we would have that information immediately.
Right, that's right.
Okay, let's go back to the aftershocks. Now, how long after the main quake do we expect those?
Normally a few weeks to few months.
Months?
But basically a few weeks the earthquakes would wane. So, but it would not, of course, it would not be as strong as the main shock.
Okay, but is there such thing as a foreshock, like minor earthquakes that come before the big one?
Yes, that's right. It's possible.
Okay, and usually how strong are those, and how soon before the main quake do they occur?
Sometimes it could take days before the main shock.
Okay.
So for example, for Zambales, we're closely monitoring the main shock, and then 24 hours after, we record an earthquake greater than the 6.1. So all of the earthquakes that we recorded are less than 4.5.
Okay.
So
relatively weak. But the public fears na baka these quakes are a prelude to the big one. Could that be?
No, the big one is coined for the West Valley Fault.
Okay.
And for the big one, as I've said, it's the West Valley Fault is ripe for the big one because, as I've said, it happened in 1658, and there's a recurrence interval of 400 years. So that's 1698.
So these are really
2058 rather.
58, yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Now, in terms of predicting quakes, you have these messages that make the rounds on social media saying, the big one is coming on such and such. But really, wala pa tayong technology that can accurately predict when quakes are going to happen, right?
That's right. Wala pang technology that can really tell as to when an earthquake would take place, at what time, where exactly. Wala pa tayong technology.
Okay. Even if you consider other factors in nature, wala pa rin.
Like unusual animal behavior. No, it's not scientific, and we don't subscribe to this unusual animal behavior.
All right, lastly, any reminders for the public?
Earthquakes don't necessarily kill people. It's the human built structures that can claim lives. So collapse of buildings, retaining walls, embankments, these are the structures that may claim lives. So we should always be prepared. We should always do the earthquake drill, and preparedness should come from all levels, from the families to communities to local government units to national government, and we should always be prepared.
Okay, now when there is an earthquake, is it normal that one follows after the other? Like you mentioned, the ones we had this week were on
totally different.
Were totally different. So that you said that was just random. But if you have the same generator or the same fault line, it's normal na magkasunod, di ba?
Not necessarily, because Samar and Davao is quite far. But there's a term called stress transfer. And the stress during an earthquake, a fault would release a stress. And this stress will be transferred to a nearby fault. Nearby fault meaning close to each other. And that nearby fault could also generate another earthquake. May also generate another earthquake. But they should be close to each other.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much for answering all our questions. We really appreciate it. Maraming salamat. PHIVOLCS scientist Dr. Teresito Bacolcol.